Welcome to A Shot of Ag. I'm your host, Rob Sharkey. Farming, a lot of times multi-generational, and it's always a challenge. How do you bring back the next generation? Does it have to be a boy? Lots of questions and lots of answers. Well, today's guest is all about those answers. We're talking with Leonard Sheaffer from Dixon, Illinois. How you doing, Leonard?
I'm doing good.
Dixon, Illinois, up north of Peoria, what, about 2 hours?
Yeah, it's a 2-hour drive. It's around 90 miles.
Okay. You're the fancy town that has the arch over.
Right, the arch from World War I, I think they put it up.
Why?
It was for all the veterans coming back.
Oh.
It was a memorial arch.
Okay. Ronald Reagan's boyhood home.
Boyhood
correct?
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he saved all the girls that were drowning in the river.
He was a bit of a player, wasn't he?
Yeah, I guess so. They said 70 drowners, but he rescued 70, but they're not sure how many were really drowning.
70. How could you find 70 people that are drowning?
I don't know. Well, it's a river.
I guess. You're farming up there.
Right.
You farmed your whole life?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I assume you grew up on a farm.
Yeah, same farm.
What kind of farm was it when you were growing up?
It was a dairy farm. My dad had dairy cattle and also raised a lot of chickens for eggs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I found his records from the 50s, and he sold a lot of eggs.
Really? And I mean, was it like it is now? I mean, it's all going to one, company, packer.
No, he had people in town he delivered to. People stopped and bought it. He had a brother that had a store north of Sterling that had a Bade broker's license, and he went to Chicago every week, so he took eggs in there.
Okay. And a lot of that's come back, hasn't it, to your farm? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you grew up farming. Did you know that you wanted to come back to the farm?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do. That was kind of the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to make plans if, do you go to college and then go to Vietnam, or do you go to Vietnam and hope you come home to go to college?
Yeah. That I don't think people understand today the whole draft, and I mean it had to be scary.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then they finally came out with the lottery, which to me made a lot of sense, because then you got a number. I was like 60. Well, if you got 360, then the odds of you being drafted is pretty small, and you could plan your life.
Yeah.
If you got a 10, well, you knew what you were going to be doing.
Yeah.
So when they came out with that, I think that was a lot better program.
Okay, so you got 60.
Yeah.
When you got that, were you worried?
Well, I had a college deferment, and by the time I finished college, it was over.
Okay.
They quit drafting.
Gotcha. Okay. So what'd you go to school for?
Well, originally I thought I was going to major in industrial technology, but I decided there's a lot of classes I wasn't really interested in. So I went back and looked. I went to Sauk for 2 years, and I looked at what course I found most interesting that didn't have to take a foreign language, because I did lousy with a foreign language in high school. I did good the first year. The second year, I didn't remember anything from the first year.
What language?
I took Latin.
Well, that's your problem, man. You can't take Latin.
And I was a junior, so I was with all the freshmen too. But so anyway, the class that I found most interesting was economics, so I majored in economics.
Gotcha. So after you graduated, what'd you do?
Well, I kind of was thinking, what do I want to do with economics? You basically got to get a master's, and I was already frustrated enough living in DeKalb, which isn't a big city, that I didn't really have a place I could call my own to park my car, and I'm going to end up in a city if I ended up getting a master's, and I didn't really want that lifestyle. And my dad was turning 60 and said he wanted to quit milking. I thought, no, I'll do this, and I can open my own shop and work on other people's stuff.
Okay, so you made a life decision based on the fact that you weren't going to have a parking spot.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I'm used to living in the country. Living in town is just a different thing to me.
Yeah. So were you doing what, accounting?
No, I mean, I just majored in economics, but I never, economics isn't really accounting.
Okay. Well, you said you opened up a shop.
Oh, I was interested in repairing stuff. My junior year in high school, I overhauled the engine in my car, and my senior year, I worked in an ag work program and worked for an implement dealer, and changed tires, pulled motors, did all kinds of stuff.
It's pretty major stuff.
Yeah,
It's not like just, I don't know, normal. Changing a whole motor is pretty involved.
Yeah, the service truck needed a motor, so I tore the motor out, you know. I learned a lot. Didn't pay much, $1 an hour.
Boy, that has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah,
You'd be making bank now.
Yeah, the next year I got a job at Armour's meatpacking plant, paid $4.15 an hour, and that was big wages.
Was it?
Oh yeah.
What were you doing there?
I was in night cleanup. They slaughtered 600 head a day, and my job was to wash the clothes, clean the lunchroom, and hose down the floor and the coolers.
Okay. All right, so on from then. Well, first of all, where'd you meet your wife?
I met her at the Methodist Church in Rock Falls. There was a Methodist singles group, and she was a nurse, and a friend of hers went to a Methodist church in Dixon and wanted her to go to the singles group. So she went, and I got there late, and they got there late, and there was a concert at junior college the next week, and I asked them both if they wanted to go, and they both said yes.
You both?
What kind of luck do I have?
You're a player.
Yeah, I have a long drive period, and then 2 people say yes. So I said, I'll take the redhead and told my cousin, you can take the other one.
Oh.
So.
And the redhead ended up being your wife.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
It's good to have choices in life,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Sounds romantic.
Oh, it was pretty nice. I tried researching her, trying to figure out something about her,
Did you Google
looked
her?
in yearbooks and stuff. Well, there was no Google back then. And I couldn't find anything. And I says, she might have a child. So when I went to pick her up, she says, I want to say goodnight to my kids.
Oh.
So I figured she was like 19 and I was 28.
Yeah.
And so we went to the door, and one was in kindergarten, one was in 3rd grade.
Oh, okay.
So I guess she's not 19 years old. So it runs in the family. They all look young.
Did she lie about her age?
No, we never talked about age.
Oh, you assumed?
I just assumed.
Oh, well, that's on you, isn't it?
Yep.
All right, so tell me about how you got back to your farm.
Well, it was pretty easy. I got done, the last semester I commuted anyway, so I was already starting to, I was involved with the dairy as it was.
Yeah. And this was, I don't know, like the parlor type dairy?
No, it was a stanchion barn. My dad moved there in '46. It had been a horse barn, and my grandfather had bought the farm in like '39. And my dad spent 3 years in the South Pacific in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And so they remodeled the horse barn for a dairy barn and had 16 stanchions.
Okay.
And then in the 60s, he added 6 more. So we were milking, by 79, we were milking 50 cows. So we had to switch cows a couple times and stuff. But he was kind of, he's the one that came up and says, well, I think we could get a pipeline. One year, he's like, well, I think we should build a silo. And I want a bottom loader because I'm afraid of heights.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and he was in his 60s, but, he probably wanted me to be successful. And, he wasn't afraid to spend a little money.
Okay. But you ended up building a parlor yourself, right?
Yeah, I decided I didn't want to wait till I was 50 to build a parlor. I wanted to build it when I was younger and use it.
Yeah.
But parlors are expensive. So I bought a building. They did the concrete. It was concrete foundation. It was a 55 by 90 concrete foundation, and they did the concrete for the parlor. Mm-hmm. And then I did all the plumbing, the drains, electrical. Had a retired farmer that did carpenter work. He did the carpenter with me, and I put in the pipeline and everything. And
pipeline for the milk.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the parlor, yeah. And I found a used parlor that was a year old. It was the company's first parlor that they built, and then they used it like a year, and then they sold it to somebody. And I ended up buying it. I think it was like a $28,000 setup for like $6,000.
So when you say parlor, you're talking like the metal, the stanchions?
Where cows come in groups.
Yeah.
And you're in a pit, and they're at eye level, they're udders.
Okay.
And then it had automatic takeoff. She'd put the milker on, and when it was done, it would shut off and swing out of the way. And so you could milk 50 cows an hour, and it was kind of relaxing.
Oh, really?
After being in a stanchion barn where, you know, you got to squat down and do everything. And
Well, the stanchion one, you weren't doing it by hand, right?
no, we had
Yeah.
a pipeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We just interviewed a guy that was doing it by hand when he was a kid, so you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when my daughter started milking, she started when she was 14, and she had 2 cows, and she milked by hand for 2 weeks, and then I had to do it for the weekend. Then
Oh,
we got a milker going then.
That's a good incentive, isn't
Yeah.
it? Tell me why it's called Windsweep Farms.
Well, my dad, when he was in the South Pacific, on one of the islands, they had like group tents, and I guess it must have been a windy island, and so they called their tent Windsweep, and they had this sign that was probably this by this, and it had a picture of a tent, and it had this person blowing the wind at it, and the names of the 8 guys in the tent. So he always called it Windsweep Farm. Back in the 50s, he had stationery that said Windsweep Farm. So
Okay.
when we decided we're going to start selling meat to people, to consumers, we decided to call it Windsweep Farm.
Well, plus Dixon, you're the land of the wind turbines too.
Yeah.
You probably have enough wind
Well,
up there.
no, they're south of us a little.
Yeah. So there's no wind at your farm.
Well, there's wind. We're on the top of a hill, so, you know, milking, usually you had a breeze going through the barn. It was
Yeah.
the open east and west. And
So right now, how you have a daughter, and she is what? She co-owner of the farm now?
well, I farmed the ground I originally farmed. She and her husband they bought 60 acres, and I bought 90 acres of farm, and they're raising organics on their farm. But it was a farm that had some old barns that most people, if they would have bought it, would have torn them down. But for us, they work beautiful.
Okay.
You know, I mean, because we've got livestock, and the 90 acres I bought has 40 acres of pasture with it.
Okay.
And
So between the two of you, what are you all raising on your farm now?
okay, we sell beef, pork, lamb, chicken, eggs. Did I say lamb? I think I did.
I think you
Sheep,
did. Yeah.
Soap, honey.
Soap, honey. That's
about
it?
Oh, turkey. She raises turkeys. Some of this, I'm in partner with her on the beef and the eggs. We
Yeah.
got duck eggs too.
Well, that's.
But she
9.
raises the sheep and the pigs.
I get a feeling if we just keep talking, you'll just, and then there's buffalo and all that stuff.
No buffalo.
Yeah.
We sell grain finished, grass finished, and Wagyu beef.
Oh, the Wagyu.
Yeah. I started bringing that about 10 years ago, and Renee told people I was crazy or something, but
Yeah.
I said, what the heck, it's a niche, it doesn't cost us any more to do it. And I went to Japan on a marketing trip in 2003 with Farm Bureau, and we went to the farms where they raised them, and you know, I thought, let's try it. So it's worked out good. What happened was we buy extra calves from a big dairy, and I told them about breeding to Wagyu, and I went back a year later and said, well, I've been breeding to Wagyu. Well, they're smaller calves. We didn't realize at the time, so for calving ease, they're a good breed to use.
Yeah.
So we ended up with all these Wagyus. Well, last August, we didn't have hardly any grain finished. Everything was Wagyu, and we get 25% more for the Wagyu beef than the regular, but we didn't have any regular. And
Oh.
Renee says, well, we're going to have to sell it, you know, like the regular. And I said, well, why don't we just mark it up 5% until it's Wagyu? You know, so they're not getting it at the regular price. They're paying a little premium,
Yeah.
but it's regular 25% more.
Yeah.
And we have an awful lot of people that we did that with, and now they want Wagyu.
Price of cattle plus the bump in the price, my gosh. It's,
Well, newborn calves that we buy at the dairy are $1,250.
that's something.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But, you know, they said that's the only thing that's saving them because the price of milk isn't.
Yeah, oh, that's true. You mentioned Japan. Tell me, I love this. You went to Japan. How did you get involved in bringing the tractors over?
Well, 2 years before I sold the cows, we had an old 2-end tractor, and I was having fits with the thing. And I thought, man, it would really be nice to get one of these little diesel tractors.
Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't want to spend $15,000 for diesel tractor that's in the manure all the time. And so I got looking, I found out you could import used ones from Japan. And in Japan, you know, they're small rice paddies. So the first container load I bought had 4 tractors that were 1979s that had less than 500 hours on them.
Okay.
And
For a diesel should be nothing.
yeah, they're diesels, 4-wheel drive, and Japan has a different philosophy than we do. I talked to a guy from CAT that had been there 3 years, and he said that they say don't break the other guy's rice bowl. So basically, they don't have a repair industry.
Oh.
They ship the stuff overseas. You hear about takeout engines for cars.
Yeah.
They said there was an outboard motor that was really good in races, so they passed a law you can only use it in 2 races. And then they had government subsidies for people to, you know, buy tractors, finance them. It's like the cars. On the trip, I had a cousin whose son was over there, and when we were in Tokyo, he came to pick me up and we went to his house to eat.
Yeah.
And he had this really fancy sports car. And he says, well, I could buy it because, you know, it's a few years old. Well, they have an inspection that's really expensive, but the older the car gets, the more often you have to have it.
Yeah.
So it discourages people from keeping cars very long.
Yeah. Everything's over there is fairly new.
Yeah.
So to buy these tractors, you had to buy a container of them?
Right.
So how many tractors in a container?
A 40-foot container would have 16 tractors. 16 tractors, and they build a double deck, so there's 2
Yeah.
layers. And they're not like you could drive on the upper layer. I mean, you actually take the tractors off, you tear that deck out, and then you get the ones out underneath. But they have the wheels off, the fenders off, the steering wheels off.
Yeah.
Plus, they include all the rototillers with them, too.
Oh, okay.
So you've got a pile of stuff to unload, and you got like 8 hours to do it.
Okay, and you have to pay the money ahead of time.
Right.
And then you just wait for
Yeah,
it to show up?
about 6 weeks, you know. And when I started, it was in '97, so at that time you weren't getting, you know, emails with pictures
No.
of tractors or anything.
So you write a check,
Yeah.
probably a pretty substantial one
Yeah,
back
it
in
was
the day.
$30,000.
Okay, so yeah, back then.
Yeah.
And you're waiting on tractors. You're worried about like Godzilla damage to them and all this stuff.
Well, usually it depends who you buy them from, and I was buying from an outfit that had really good quality.
Yeah.
I mean, I had people that bought parts from me, and they'd get a container and spend $1,000 on front-wheel drive seals. I think in the whole time I did it, I put 2 front-wheel drive seals in the ones I got. I
Oh.
mean, they were really good quality.
So, and that's what you did. You sold.
Yeah, well, you know, you buy the tractors. The place I was buying them from, basically, you'd paint the wheels because they looked like they'd been sandblasted.
Yeah.
The wheels and the frames, the tin work, it looked good, even though it was a, you know, 20-year-old tractor.
Huh. Well, you know, every little side hustle.
Yeah.
Speaking
Well,
of,
and of course, the thing is, you know, people don't just want a tractor. They want a loader, they want a
Oh,
finish mower, they want a rotary mower, they want a blade, they
I
want a
get it.
rototiller.
attachments,
Yeah.
I'm addicted to them.
Yeah.
You can't have enough. Speaking of little side hustles, what you got? What, fudge here?
Yeah, try a taste. It's if you try eating it, you're going to think you're having mouthwash or something. This is
Wouldn't be the
soap.
first time.
This is soap that the Oregon Soap Shop makes. They've been in business 25 years. Put a plug in for them. They buy lard and milk from us to make their soap.
Okay.
And I said before COVID, I said, well, why don't you label some for us, and we'll promote you, you promote us, and
Windsweep Farms.
yeah. So when COVID hit, the mayor of Oregon said they were an essential business, and they stayed open the whole time.
The soap was essential,
Yes.
I suppose, right? Because we're
Yeah.
all supposed to wash our hands.
But, you know, that's kind of interesting. It's just a small shop, you know, that the community thought that was important enough just to keep that little shop open when everybody else is being shut down.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Tell me what it means to have your daughter come back and farm.
Well, you know, I used to have all the barns full of tractor stuff, and slowly she's just taken all the room and put cattle in there. So I kind of lost a lot of my space.
Again, have you seen the price of cattle? That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. I
Y'all
know.
are doing well.
Well, it's like we didn't raise our prices for beef much after COVID or during COVID. And then like a year ago, she says, we're 5% under the market. We could take our cattle to sale barn, make more money. And so like in 6 months, we had to raise the price 3 times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you deserve to make money.
Yeah.
And sometimes at farmers, we forget that.
Yeah, well, and that's it. We're looking at some farmers markets, and we visited one, and we were looking what they were selling, meat for, and Renee's like, don't they know they can take it to the sale barn and make more money? And we were thinking about going there, and we decided, no, we're not going to go there because we can't compete, on their price.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Let's say a younger person comes up to you and says, hey, I'm trying to make a decision whether I should farm or not. What advice would you give them?
Well, my advice always, when I was younger, when I was a young farmer, if you don't have money, you don't have resources, it's pretty hard to start. But if you start small, doing grain I don't think is the answer. It's got to be with livestock where you can have something reproduce. You can build a herd. I had 2 cornea transplants, and the first one, I sold all my cows. Mm-hmm. I kept all the heifers, and in I guess it was more like 8 months, I was back milking 18 cows.
Okay.
And in a year, I was at 36 cows, because I had offsprings, and, that's, Renee she bought 1 brown Swiss calf, and she's milking 7 brown Swiss right now.
Okay.
And she sold cattle to a couple families in northern Illinois. She sold a couple to people in Missouri, and one even went out to Montana.
Oh.
But, if you have something that reproduces, to me, you can grow. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good advice. And you guys are doing well. You've got, you got a lot of side stuff. You got all the prices for the raw milk, the Wagyu, the grass-fed, Berkshire. If somebody wants something to eat, you guys are the place to go.
Yeah, we're kind of the protein source.
Uh-huh. So you got an email here, email@windsweepfarms.com. Is there a website?
She has a website. Renee pretty much does all the marketing. She basically corresponds mostly by text because she has 5 children, 10 and under, and she homeschools.
5 children?
Yes.
10 and under?
Yes. 3, 5, 7, 9, and 10.
Your daughter needs a hobby.
I don't think she does. She cooks from scratch. She has a big garden. Between the 4th and the 5th, she had lymphoma, and she still had a garden. I said, Renee, you don't have to have a garden. I gotta have a garden, and she homeschools. She has somebody that milks about half the time.
Okay, gotcha. You've spent an entire lifetime in agriculture and farming. Where do you think we're going?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I look at the autonomous, how do I say it?
Autonomous, yeah.
Autonomous. I don't know. I just got done reading John Kirshenbaum's book.
Who?
Kinsey.
Oh,
Das Kinselbaum.
from McKinsey. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
And he talks about this grain cart and tractor and planter, and people, instead of having one big planter, having multiple little planters. I don't know if that's really. This book's a few years old, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the way things are going. Sometimes I wonder how big is big enough. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're doing direct to market. I think vertically integrating is what people need to do.
Yeah.
Now, we did the high oil corn, when Wiffles was really promoting it. And, you finally get to a point it's a commodity.
Yeah.
And it's like the organic. Was it last year they had wheat? Organic wheat was cheaper than conventional wheat.
Yeah, see, that just,
it
is difficult.
So to me, you have to vertically integrate. I invested in an ethanol plant in Lena, and not because I had money to invest, because I didn't, but
Yeah.
I thought we should vertically integrate. It's ended up being, a real good investment.
Yeah, that plant did well.
Yes.
Not all of them did, but yeah.
No.
Oh, I'm glad that plant did well. You make a very good point too. just looking at all the equipment, you make very, very good points. We could talk all day, and unfortunately, PBS won't let us.
Oh, that's too bad.
Leonard Sheaffer from Dixon, Illinois. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's been too long since we had a chance to catch up. Thank you very much for coming.
Sure.
Everybody else, we'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to explore more of our local content. You can connect with us on our social media platforms, visit our website, or download and watch the free PBS app. We can't wait to see you next time on A Shot of Ag.